My wife Linda and I have been together since 1999, and we got hitched in 2001. I always considered myself lucky to have met her, smart, loyal, and caring as they come. Heck, she's even stunning to this day, and men have been singing her praises our entire marriage. She's always brushed them off. Earlier this year, Linda was diagnosed with stage 1 uterine cancer and had to undergo a full hysterectomy. Luckily, it was caught early and treated fast. She made a full recovery, and I took some time off work to take care of her post-surgery. She went through some understandable emotional turbulence, but we tackled it together despite my own lack of sentimentality. After she recovered, Linda was dead set on living life to the fullest. She planned a 10-day European getaway, then a trip to Belize, and now she's got our sights set on the UK and Spain, Portugal. I understood her yearning for adventure after such a scare, and I wanted to help her check off those bucket list items. She also threw herself into yoga, swimming, and healthy cooking classes, which I supported. All seemed fine until last week. One evening, she came home from work and straight up asked for a hall pass, a one-time chance to sleep with someone other than me. She said that the cancer scare had flipped her outlook on life, and she didn't want to be shackled by convention anymore. Apparently, there was some dude at work she'd always been drawn to, and since he was leaving soon, it was now or never for her to scratch that itch. If I said no, she claimed she'd be disappointed and fume at me for who knows how long. She also said it would be proof of my toxic masculinity and insecurities. Maybe I'm insecure, but I reckon it's only natural not to want your wife of over 2 decades hopping into bed with another guy. I told her that while I was grateful she was honest with me, coercion doesn't mean consent. And implying I'm insecure or toxic for not rolling over just rubbed me the wrong way. I warned her that this wasn't a light issue and could impact our marriage permanently. I never thought I'd see the day where Linda would throw out a curveball like this. She's pushing me into a corner, and it's tough figuring out which way to go. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, and Linda, already waiting for me in the kitchen, bluntly apologized for dumping such a massive decision on my shoulders alone. But then, in her own twisted logic of helping, she said she'd taken the decision out of my hands. She'd booked a room at a hotel near where her coworkers were holding a farewell party for this guy and planned to spend the night with him. Linda hoped I'd still be here when she got back. She promised to answer any questions afterward, but wouldn't spill any details beforehand, insisting she wouldn't tell me his name or anything about him. "You just obsess over it," she said. "It would make it too real for you." She knew me well enough to realize that was probably true. Her rationale was that ignorance would protect me from overthinking, though it clashed with her offer to divulge anything once it was over. Frankly, I believe she knows I won't ask a thing afterward, or she simply won't come clean. Part of me wants to commend her for at least being upfront about it, considering all she's been through since her cancer diagnosis. Maybe I should just let it slide. I can't fully grasp what she went through, and I can't deny how it must have impacted her outlook. On the other hand, I feel like I should draw a line and put my foot down, even if it means facing whatever fallout follows. Her best friend had the nerve to call me callous for even suggesting I wouldn't let this happen, saying I had no idea what Linda had experienced. But I can't fathom how she's willing to jeopardize more than 20 years of marriage for some guy she's barely interacted with beyond the office. Should I call her bluff? Maybe she's betting I won't risk our marriage over a single fling. I'm torn. One moment, I empathize with her, and the next, I'm seething. A part of me is desperate to know who this guy is. What does he look like? What makes him so irresistible to her? Is he just a safe, convenient option, or does he really have something special? Is he married? Does his wife even know? I keep running these questions through my mind, each one gnawing at me like a splinter under the skin. And what about me? Does it make me a selfish jerk if I say no? What's the right move here besides packing my bags and leaving? Linda believes that since she won't see this guy again, and I've supposedly never met him, it won't affect our marriage in the long term. I'm left with 2 choices: accept it and never look at her the same way, or face a divorce at 54. Neither option feels remotely good. I can't gauge where her head is. That cancer bout did a number on her in ways I can't fathom. She doesn't think I'll walk away. I had hoped my strong opposition would give her pause, but she steamrolled through my objections. I made it clear I was a hard no and told her I couldn't guarantee how I'd feel about her if she went through with it. But she kept saying, This is for me. It'll only be one time. What can I do to help you cope? You'll get over it. We were meant to be no matter what. Her words echoed through my mind as Saturday approached. Saturday rolled around and Linda left, supposedly to meet her coworkers, but, in reality, to sleep with the guy. I asked her to text me when she was leaving for the bar. When she did, I asked if she was truly going to go through with this, but she just responded, "I'm not answering any more questions tonight. I'll see you tomorrow." Then I blocked her number. That's when I made a decision, either stupid or brilliant. I went to the bar where the party was being held, but didn't go inside. Instead, I parked myself on a nearby bus bench. I sat there, running through all the thoughts that had been plaguing me, desperate to know who this guy was and compare myself to him. I wanted to see what this fellow had that was worth jeopardizing a long-standing marriage. After what felt like forever, I noticed a woman from Linda's office leaving the bar and catching a cab. Slowly, more people trickled out until a whole group gathered around a man, hugging and shaking his hand. I figured I had my guy. I scanned the group, hoping to see my wife backing out of this madness, but she was nowhere to be seen. My heart raced as I unblocked her, but there were no new messages. As the crowd said their goodbyes and scattered, the guy lingered a moment longer before Linda emerged. She glanced around briefly, clasped his hand, and walked off with him. A tidal wave of disgust crashed over me, eclipsing the sadness, anger, and trepidation I'd felt earlier. This guy was short, fat, and balding, traits I could never compete with. The perverse irony of the whole scene left me gutted as I slumped back on the bench. I trailed them until they reached the hotel, then turned back around and trudged home. It left me feeling like a voyeur, ashamed for spying on the very woman who once meant everything to me. On Sunday morning, I got up early and put a lock on the master bedroom door. I shifted all of Linda's belongings to the spare room and left a note instructing her to find other accommodations as soon as possible. I then reached out to a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and he gave me some wise advice and a couple of recommendations for divorce attorneys. He even made the introductions himself. Since around 11 a.m., Linda had been calling repeatedly, her frantic voicemails filling up after I blocked her. I listened to the first few but felt a small measure of satisfaction hearing her panic as she realized she couldn't reach me. I had no desire to head back home, but hadn't planned on an overnight stay. Reluctantly, I returned around 9 p.m., following my buddy's advice to record our interaction. Halfway up the stairs, Linda emerged from the family room, immediately asking what was happening, whether we could talk, and reminding me that we'd discussed this already. But I just shot back, "I'm not interested in discussing this tonight," and headed to bed. After trying to get through the locked door a few times with no response, she finally left me alone. I felt a bit childish for locking her out and avoiding the conversation altogether, but honestly, I couldn't bear to look at her. When I woke up Monday morning and got ready for work, she was waiting, wanting to talk about getting back to normal. I cut her off with a bitter, "You've been doing all the talking for the both of us this past week, so why don't you keep at it?" and walked out. I have an appointment this week with the attorneys my friend recommended. She went through with it, and frankly, I'm more disgusted by her choice of a partner than the act itself, if that even makes any sense. But that's not the point. Either way, she betrayed me and shattered what we had. I told her to find another place to live, and I'm done waiting around for apologies or excuses. When the dust settled, I realized I'd been desperately clinging to something that no longer existed. There was no saving what was left, so I moved forward with divorce proceedings. Linda has regret, but not remorse. Those two are different things entirely. She regrets what happened because it's turned her life upside down, but she hasn't shown any genuine remorse for her betrayal. If maybe her cancer had returned and spread to her brain, affecting her judgment. Whether that's the case or not, it hardly matters to me at this point. I just don't see her the same way anymore. In my frustration, I told the husbands of her friends how they had enabled this behavior, and the fallout has been remarkable. I suggested that maybe they were all covering for each other, and that Linda was just another link in the chain. It got those guys combing through their wives' phones, and a couple even found inappropriate sexting messages. All of them have since demanded that their wives cut off contact with Linda and even distance themselves from each other. While it was never my intention to sow this kind of chaos, I couldn't stand by and let it slide without consequences. Linda's betrayal cracked open a much bigger issue And the fallout just goes to show how fragile these webs of deceit can be. My lawyer was unavailable for several days, leaving me no choice but to stay under the same roof with Linda. I was dreading it because I couldn't stomach the idea of discussing anything, let alone talking about our relationship and the mess she had made of it. When I finally returned home, I walked into a full-on ambush. Linda had her friends over, and my mother-in-law was right there with them, looking like a unified front. They didn't take the remorseful approach you'd expect. Instead, they launched a full-court press, berating me from all angles. Linda's best friend was the ringleader, but each one chimed in with their own insults. "She's been through so much," they said. "You don't know what it's like to face cancer. This was just a one-time thing, and at least she was honest with you. She could have hidden it." And then, the cherry on top. "You're an asshole for putting her through all this over the past few days." I stood there, donning a wry grin like a fool until their fury started to subside. I turned to Linda and asked if she'd forgotten to loop in anyone else. Then I calmly informed them that I planned to sit down with each of their husbands and share how they'd verbally abused me, tried to shame me, and attempted to coerce me into staying married to a cheater. After asking them to leave, I pointed out that just as I had no say in Linda's affair, they had no right to influence my decision to stay or leave. My soon-to-be ex-wife muttered an apology, claiming she regretted everything that had happened, but I wasn't buying it. "There's a difference between regret and remorse," I told her. "You regret this because of the consequences. Your life will never be the same, and our relationship is shattered because you were completely unconcerned about how I felt." She then offered to answer any question I had, no matter how uncomfortable or disturbing. I had just one. Why? Not just why that particular guy, but why anyone at all. She explained that her bout with cancer had completely shaken her. She felt like she was racing toward death, and stepping out of that dark tunnel was her escape. After all those years as a wife and mother, worrying endlessly about family, this was supposed to be something purely for her. The guy was simply someone who'd shown interest for a long time, wouldn't say no, and was totally different from me. I looked her straight in the eye and told her that if I were risking my marriage, it would have to be for someone far better than her. I then confessed that I'd seen her and that guy leaving the bar together that night, walking hand in hand toward the hotel. I told her they looked far too comfortable with each other and asked if this affair had started earlier. She denied it, claiming nothing had happened before that night. But how am I supposed to know that's the truth and not just another lie? At this point, I couldn't believe a single word she said. I looked her straight in the eye and said that after all our years together, her lack of respect for me was utterly astonishing. I told her I couldn't look at myself in the mirror if I condoned that level of disrespect and chose to stay with her. "I hope we can go our separate ways amicably," I added, "because I've got an appointment with a lawyer later this week." I once more asked her to find other accommodations, but she stood firm. "I'm not going anywhere. We're not getting a divorce," she declared. "I'll give you all the time you need and do whatever it takes for you to recover from this. We'll get past it." She suggested marriage counseling, but I refused. "Why would I go to counseling when I did nothing wrong?" I said, baffled by the idea that I should be the one seeking a therapist's advice. Soon after, I had her served and gave her a notice to vacate. The house was my premarital asset, and she eventually moved in with her mom. But despite that, she kept coming by to see if I needed anything or making desperate suggestions like, "What if we had an open relationship just for you?" Or, "How about threesomes?" Her efforts seemed pathetic and frantic. I finally put my foot down, insisting she call before coming over and seek permission beforehand. It felt like she was starting to get the message that there would be no us moving forward. Still, she warned that she'd drag the divorce out as long as possible, though she had been compliant so far. The hardest part of all this was breaking the news to my daughter, explaining that we were getting a divorce and why. Hearing her beg me to give her mom another chance was gut-wrenching. I couldn't help but wonder if I'd have been shown the same compassion if I were the one who'd cheated. At first, my daughter's plea for me to give her mom another chance seemed like a gut reaction to the shock of it all. But as the weeks have passed, and she's come to understand the depth of what really happened, she's grown increasingly irritated with her mother. The betrayal has slowly sunk in, and she sees her mom in a new light. I truly loved my wife. I wasn't the only one who thought she was stunning. Others saw it too, often comparing her to Linda Carter. But now that I know she stooped so low in her affair, she's become a non-entity to me, someone I could never look at the same way again. No amount of counseling could change the way I see her now. The betrayal has left an indelible mark that counseling would only gloss over without ever erasing. Things have gotten ugly between us, and many unkind words have been exchanged. But she's been served and has moved out, which means the next step is the divorce itself. I'm hoping mediation will be reasonable, and I won't be left high and dry in the end. Getting sex is much easier for women, and maybe Linda had already been involved in an emotional affair that culminated in her betrayal. Honestly, I don't know for sure, nor do I really care, unless it benefits me during the divorce. All her friends have cut her off and are trying desperately to save their own marriages. Now, they're turning on each other to protect themselves. Linda held herself together and remained stoic right up until she was served with the divorce papers. After that, she visibly broke down, resorting to begging, pleading, and bargaining in an attempt to change my mind. Tears and desperate pleas came pouring out, but it felt more like she was performing for optics than showing genuine remorse. Maybe she had fallen out of love and now regrets her new reality. She's still an attractive woman and will find plenty of men willing to date her, but I certainly won't be one of them. If I ever felt like going nuclear, I could expose her affair to her coworkers, but that would be a disaster. I want her to stay employed so I won't have to pay maintenance while she's between jobs. There's a woman at her office who has always looked at me in an inviting way. Maybe I'll try dating her after the divorce wraps up. It would be interesting on a couple of levels. There isn't much to report beyond the fact that we're working through the divorce process. In our jurisdiction, we need to be legally separated for a full year before finalizing anything. My soon-to-be ex-wife Linda has offered to give me whatever I want in the divorce if I agree to attend marriage counseling, but I'm not interested. It just feels like an empty promise. We've had some back and forth while figuring out how our separation will work on a daily basis. We've recently agreed on the terms of the legal separation, so as we move towards defining the final divorce language, maybe my stance will change, but I doubt it. I don't see any kind of reconciliation on the horizon, no matter how much she pleads or bargains. The house is mine, a premarital asset, so Linda can't stake any claim to it. The only things she might attempt to go after are my pension, the vehicles, and our vacation property. If she tries, I'd counter with the fact that she lived rent-free for over 20 years, has her own money, and inherited a sizable amount from her father. I may consider offering a slight increase in her retirement fund because she was a stay-at-home mom when our daughter was young, but that's the extent of it. I won't be offering anything more, given the betrayal she put me through. There's been a lot of talk and speculation surrounding her friends and my daughter, so I'll clear things up here. My daughter isn't siding with her mother. She was always close to Linda, but now she's clearly unhappy with her. Initially, she reacted with shock, holding out hope that we could work through our issues and find a way to stay together. But as the reality of the situation settled in, she realized that wasn't going to happen, and has since started limiting her interactions with her mother. Nevertheless, she still loves her mom. She's simply grappling with how much damage was done. Meanwhile, Linda's friend group hasn't fared well. The husbands were furious when they learned how complicit their wives had been in facilitating Linda's affair. They pressured their wives to sever ties with Linda to protect their own marriages, but sadly, that determination has already started to fade for some. Linda's best friend played the ringleader, encouraging the affair to the point where her husband began questioning her motives. It turns out she disliked me all along and saw this as a way to stick it to me, basking in the chaos she helped create. I suppose she feels like she won, but at what cost? The best friend's husband found some explicit texts on her phone and claimed he was dealing with it. We met up, and he apologized for his wife's role in the whole mess, though it's not his fault. He seemed genuinely remorseful that his wife played a part in pushing Linda down this path, and I don't hold him accountable for her actions. I simply want to put all this behind me and move on with my life. In the meantime, I've decided not to date anyone for a while. My priorities have shifted, and I feel like focusing on myself and my daughter right now is crucial. As for getting married again, that ship has sailed. I can say with certainty that I won't be walking down the aisle a second time. Marriage has left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I have no interest in repeating the experience. For now, I'll concentrate on rebuilding my life and finding peace on my own terms. Despite everything that's happened, I'm finding peace in small steps. I've begun rediscovering old hobbies and reconnecting with friends. It's refreshing to remember who I was before all this turmoil, a man with interests, dreams, and aspirations beyond a marriage that unraveled. My daughter remains a priority, and I'm doing my best to support her through this, while also taking care of myself. The road ahead isn't going to be smooth, but I'm determined to carve out a new life that prioritizes my well-being and happiness. Letting go of the anger and bitterness is challenging, but it's a work in progress, and I believe I'll come out stronger on the other side. Ultimately, I know that moving forward is the only direction worth heading.